A very good morning to all our panelists and all those who have tuned in today's webinar on UPSC interview, which is known as the personality tests, and we'll have tips from experts. The Union Public Service Commission has released the Civil Service Examination 2024 personality test schedule. The interviews will be held between January 7 and April 17th of next year. And today's webinar, which is part of the career counseling series of the Hindu Education Plus and presented by the Fortune IAS Academy, is right in time for the 2,845 candidates who have cleared the civil services main examination and are preparing for the interview set to begin in less than a fortnight's time. And for many other aspirants who plan to take the exam, dubbed as one of the toughest in the country, given its less than 1 pass percentage. So without wasting time, let me plunge into the introductions with the speakers who will share their wisdom and inputs on how to crack the UPSC interview. And as you can all see on your screens, we have three speakers, and we will start with Professor D.P. Agarwal, ex-chairman of Union Public Service Commission. I also need to inform our audience that Professor Agarwal would perhaps be leaving the webinar a little early due to other commitments. So once he finishes his presentation, please do send in your questions for him immediately so that he can take them up. A member of UPSC from 2003 and subsequently appointed as its chairman in 2008, Professor Agarwal is known for revolutionizing the working of the commission. During his tenure as the UPSC chairman, he introduced e-governance initiatives such as online applications for recruitment exams and also revamped the recruitment process by introducing aptitude tests. After graduating in mechanical engineering with honors from Aligarh Muslim University in 1970, Professor Agarwal received his MTech and PhD degrees from IIT Delhi in 1972 and 1978, respectively. He started his career as a faculty in the Department of Mechanical Engineering in IIT Delhi in 1975 and became the dean in 1994. While remaining active in teaching and research, Professor Agarwal also held several important positions, such as the Joint Educational Advisor Technical in the Union Ministry of Human Resource Development, Managing Director of the PSU called Educational Consultants India Limited. He was also the founder director of Indian Institute of Information Technology and Management, Gwalior. And wherever he served, Professor Agarwal initiated policies for growth and changes in work culture. He has also published more than 150 research papers and supervised over 100 theses, including 20 PhDs, and received many awards, including Eminent uh, Engineer Award in 2003, Engineer of the Year in 2006, conferred by the Institution of Engineers. A sought-after speaker, Professor Agarwal is known for his articulation on issues of innovation, quality education, public services, and information technology for the development of the common man. A very warm welcome to you, sir. It is indeed an honor and our privilege to have you with us today, and we are all eagerly waiting to hear from you about the UPSC perspective on personality test of the civil service examination. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Shall I begin or?
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Good morning to all of you, my very young co-panelists, achievers of the recent years, ma'am from Hindu, candidates who are listening. At the outset, let me congratulate all of you who have qualified first two stages of civil service, prelim as well as the mains. You all recall that in the mains preparation, you in fact read lots of material. You remain in touch with current affairs. And in fact, this is the difference between the first two aspects, the prelim one as well as the mains, and now the personality test, is that you are communicating with 5 experts who are very senior people, a lot of experience of life, and there you are discussing issues which are of common interest. If you remember, in the Gazette notification, UPSC clearly lays out what they are looking in the personality test. So to say that you are not aware will not be right. In those who have not read it, kindly read the what is called the Gazette notification point number 3, where personality test discussion takes place. Just to take from there, let me once again repeat that this personality test is conducted by a board of very senior people, a lot of experience of life, both in public as well as in governance. That's number one. They will only interact with you. There is no cross examination. It is not YMOC. It is a general discussion on issues of common interest in the country, country's development, country's relationships, country's policies, and how the society perceives their growth potential and how the government does. So these are the kind of issues which are really looked at. The question then you can ask me why we call personality test, and we interchangeably use personality test with what is called as the interview. In interview, you are supposed to know the subject matter. You are supposed to articulate, and people are assigned marks and grades. The personality test is such that personality is not built over a time. The personality is built the day you start walking, that your mother and parents start teaching you, you start interacting in your school, you start interacting in your college, you go to the canteen, you look at the films, you take parts. So this information has been sought from you by the board. So each of you, as a part of what is called detailed application form, has informed the commission about how does your personality grew from the day you were born at a place till the point you are today. This also desires that you must say in which areas you achieved while you were in school in the university, or in which areas, as a part of work which you have done, what you've done. Please also understand that there's one of other requirement is that you must take keen interest in subjects which you have studied else time. For example, if somebody has done geography in, as an MA or a BA, and he tried to appear in civil service, so he should know what has he done in his graduation subject or his MA subject. This also applies to all those engineering graduates or medical graduates. You should be always open to questions in the subject areas which made you available to be a candidate for civil service. Without a graduation degree, you are not a candidate at all. So therefore, you shouldn't forget about your degree, and you can't say that even if you made 5, 6 attempts in preparing for civil service, you cannot forget your basic background, which is required. Now, many times people ask me this question that how much I should know about my basics. Basics are always to be learned. In application of basics through one of our projects you did, or some of the examples you can carry out. They may not be too much interest to know your mathematical formulation, but they will definitely like to understand from you whether you understand the whole gamut of it. For example, if you're a civil engineer by any chance, then there are lots of activity occurring in the country in the area of infrastructure, in the area of Atmanirbhar Bharat, in the area of river linking, in the area of roads being made, and whatnot. In fact, the smart city. So there are lots of activities are occurring. They want to understand how much keen interest you take and how far you are good in your own subject to understand the nuances and the needs and wants. So please don't ignore your undergraduate degree to an extent. Let me also mention to you that as you are preparing for civil service, all of you try to read through a newspaper, and ma'am would be happy to know that 90% candidates do read Hindu. And I always keep on saying that Hindu is a good newspaper, but not that always you can understand. It's more difficult to follow. Idea is that the newspaper allows you information about what is happening around you. So if you read a daily newspaper, and they would expect you that from the day you appeared in the main till today, you at least have read what's happening in this country. I think you also appreciate all of you that whatever decisions Supreme Court has done, they become law of land. So all these kind of little nuances you must know. Countries talking about G20 in the past, they currently talked about COPA 29. So all these things are occurring. And it is what the board believes that as a young person, you would take a lot of keen interest what is happening in the country and what country is doing with the world. And does the world look the country seriously? Now for that, You cannot go by hearsay and what your heart say. Because one of the requirement is that while you are discussing a point with the board would like to look at it, your balance of judgment. Sometimes when you are driven more by your heart, you go on the other line of the stream. And when you are too much controlled by your brain, you go to other stream. So you try to be very cautious when you are in the mind game. You try to be more flamboyant when you go with heart. What the commission requires that you have a balance of judgment, that you have facts before you, good and bad about it, and then you can take a call. The second thing which I think is more critical for each of you, that most of you have read from similar kind of material. And therefore, what is more important is that you must listen question very carefully. And that is a requirement that your comprehension skills must be very high. The point which is said that we want to select a candidate who shows skills to become a bureaucrat or a civil servant in public life. Now, three virtues in public life are that you listen carefully the people around you and the people who support you and people for you work. So listening, comprehending their thoughts is the first requirement. Second requirement is that you understand what the people want. You understand the rules of the game, which are you learn the laws and things like that. And then you are able to take a decision. Decision sometimes can be tricky because it may be checking your integral aspects. So these are the three major virtues which you are supposed to do. So in that, listening is first thing. So when you listen question carefully, when you answer this question, you must be answering in such a manner that the focal point of the question is addressed by you in your own language. So what commission says that not only you should take interest in these things, but the variety in depth will also be judged. That would mean if you are discussing, say, sustainable development, they will ask you one question, they will ask you two questions, they will go down to ask you three, four, five, six questions. So they will first check you with whether how good you can get into. So that will judge. They will start say asking you sustainability, though you have not written your depth, not written your interest. But there are common interests. Currently, country talking about achieving certain standard by 2045 in 30 by 2070. And therefore, sustainable development goals remain one of the point of discussion in the board. Similarly, aspects of economic development, India becoming 5 trillion economy, the issues which are taken. India's contribution in social sector, especially how the education has moved, national policy in education, how the financial sector is doing. So in a way, if you ask me the word variety puts you in a scale where any question can be asked. It cannot be predicted easily. So please be ready for as many areas as you covered. And I can tell you that when you prepare for main exam, the four general papers, they almost cover all aspects of governance, development, and international relations. So, in my own view, if you very seriously have done the preparation for mains, there shouldn't be many problems to you because you know the variety. The only question is that how to create depth into. Now, when you create depth in terms of writing, it's a different ballgame. When you are a point of discussion, in discussion, it is your eye to eye contact. It is the contact other people, how they are looking at you. Sometimes some of them try to, they are not supposed to, though they are not supposed to do it, but they do nod here and there, try to approve or disapprove you. So you have to be very conscious of what are you saying. Now that little consciousness keeps you on a back foot. You try to find out that while you answer, are they getting interested? My submission to you, don't worry about it. You are listening a question carefully, you answer the way you want, and best get the best answer the first. Don't wait to put a introductory three sentences. Don't try to bring something in between. It's not an essay. It's a bringing the current communication in the world is that if you are given 5 minutes, when your 5 minutes are over, the person says, yes, I agree with you. That's a current communication needs in the global arena. This is also a requirement today I can only cite an example that once I was meeting the top functionary of the government, and when I said, when they said, sir, time would be 3 minutes, in 3 minutes you have to say, and therefore you have to prepare in your mind that you don't have 3 minutes here, you have 30 minutes here. In 30 minutes, there are five experts. They can ask you six questions each. Sometimes it could be even more. So you must be prepared for variety of, if there are six, you must be prepared for 20 variety. And there are so many things in governance, starting from women development, education, earning capacity, poverty, uh, the economy, the environment, the sustainability. Count any many. And many of the current points with the government keep on saying. Like currently, the one nation, one election is being talked about. So this become part of election reforms. So there are bigger issues. In budget appears. In every year, budget laid out the schemes which are going to be done. It also gives you every year what has been the performance which the government achieved on the last year budget. So there's no end. So if you say I can prepare this, I would only say if you are continuously reading newspaper, if you are continuously reading a magazine, you are already in the slot. What you must do now, and it's very simple. You every day try to question yourself. Ask as many questions in a given topic. For example, if you want to understand the women empowerment, so try to ask at least 50 questions to yourself. Similarly, pick up another quiz. So in every day you can cover 4 to 5 subjects, answer them yourself, and then try to understand whether you are convincing. Those candidates, and I found it always very useful for myself, that I'll go prepared, what I'm going to say, and when I listen my voice, I'll understand whether I am right on the track. So that judgment must come to you. And this requires a very continuous training. It is the first time you're talking. Now, having said that, the capabilities with their judging, people keep asking me what they want to look at in you. What do you think they will look at in you? As I said, they look at in you. Are you a listener? Are you a person who's not stubborn? Sometimes there's a candidate who thinks that whatever he said is the last word. Now, the kind of discussion which occurs has point of view this way or that way. So, are you adjusting to the point of views? It does not mean you change your view just like heck. You have to think other counter view and come up with that kind of view which you think has now assimilated point of view. So, that kind of assimilation in you of the new thoughts, new ideas, in bringing into your own action plan is very relevant. Integrity, integrate your words, integrate your character is more important. They can be judged so easily. For example, you feel a deaf on activities which you never did. So don't ever lie with the board. Don't even try to impress by board saying that you come from the rural area. They don't give you compassion. You are competing against the best for the best position. So why do you seek corners? Please don't seek corners ever. Don't say my father was a bureaucrat. Don't say my father was liberal. They just won't listen because this information is already with them. This only indicate to you that you are trying to impress board and trying to seek some kind of concessions. My friends, please understand there are no concessions given ever. But please also understand that there is no bias. If you come from bureaucrat, that simpler question would be asked. If you come from a liberal child, difficult question would be asked. There is no favor, there is no support available in commission other than the discussion you carry out on the board. Any such prop go against you. If the board is able to find out that you lied, I assure you, they go very heavily on you. They might, whatever you might do the best, if they establish in their mind that you are trying to bring some other words in saying they are my words, it'll be terrible for you. It's a purely intellectual property right. Even somebody's point of view, read from Hindu of a person, but you should understand his point of view and bring the point of view in your own language. Please also understand the commission is very clear. They ask you a question. You have heard this question earlier. Your language will also be very good because you have more or less tried to mug up your mind. But the moment I ask you a question slightly away, connected to this, not only you don't know the subject, your language also changes. This clearly established that you have come up with mugging. What we want bureaucrats, civil servants, whose heart is there, who has assimilated what they are trying to say there. If you have too touchy about poverty alleviation, you should feel like what poverty alleviation would mean and what a person who's poor, what it required to empower. So you must live with it. It's not like you quickly get a formula like thermodynamics law number two, fit in the equation, the results come. Civil service is not that. Civil service is finding solution based on facts. In mind you, country is free over 75 years. We have just finished the Amrit Kal. So each year bureaucrats keep on getting solutions and things like that. But still believe 20% people are still below poverty line. So difficulties are there. New challenges come. New technology come. My last few words would be that technology today is not only meant for computer scientists. Digital India is for all. Everybody uses a mobile. Everybody understands what is 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. Not only just what 5G is what, but how does 5G differ from 2G? If this question asked, it can be asked from a Sanskrit BA or English BA. Because this is a common parlance. Every day something is rotating. On environment, all kinds of questions are possible. Because in environmental day, around that time, so much is written. Similarly, on UN Day, lot of activities are done. On Yoga Day, all kinds of things done. So things which are in common frame, they are the questions you cannot dub and you cannot say no. There's always a freedom because there are five people, there are a lot of time. If you don't know a subject area, you can say no. Because they can ask you another area. Three things which should not be done. Never try to impress the board by making false statement. Number two, don't try to bring your parents, your relatives, your knowing the minister ever. It is completely no. Don't try to bring your caste, creed, and religion at all. They don't ask you a question on religion. There will never be a question on religion. There will never be a question on yourself that as a poor person, what should you do? They can ask you a generalized question. So these are completely do's. Also, don't worry too much about people ask me, how do I make my faces? How do I make my body languages? They're irrelevant. Be natural. If you try to change now, it will not be possible. So please understand, remain natural, use simple sentences, understand that whatever you are saying, it must reach him or her. All board members are listening. None of them are against you. They even don't know what are your marks mean. So this is independent examination. And therefore, there is no correlation between what are the marks obtained in the mains and this. Sometimes you can write it better, but when you try to convince on a point of view, you are not a convincing person. And you tend to believe that they ask you questions related to your knowledge. No, these are questions more related to your personal, how did you grow? I think that's all I would like to say at this stage. I've already mentioned to you what commission looks at you. Commission makes you very comfortable. Chairman try to make you as simple to as simple questions more comfortable, but discussion would be serious. Each word you speak must be careful. It must not be double meaning, and it must be very polite, humble, appear to be listening and answering. Thank you very much. I'm open to all kinds of questions now. Somaji, you are muted.
Thank you, Professor Agrawal, for those very valuable and informative inputs. I request the participants to post their questions in the Q&A box, and please do not unmute yourself or switch on the videos. Post your questions. And Professor Agrawal, while I was listening to you, I also felt that, say, for instance, 2,845 students are selected for the interview, and of those, roughly maybe 1,000 students would make the cut. candidates would make the cut. So roughly the ratio would be 1:3. So in one sense,
1:2.5.
yeah, 1:2. So like it, while it is a very close competition, it may not also be a very tough competition, in the sense, as you yourself mentioned, that if I have reached the mains level, which means I already have a sound knowledge base, and so I should be able to pull it through. So now one Gargi is asking that she had a score of 165 in CSE 2023 and missed by 13 marks, and she wants to know exactly those parameters on which we are marked, the candidates are marked.
I mentioned already. I said you must give your own view, a balanced judgment, and you must be honest. They ask you a question, listen question carefully, remain to the point, and if it's a question on a current affairs subject where you think it's a controversy, come with your data correct and give your view. And see, please also understand, many people tend to believe they miss because they got less marks in interview. They forget that they got lesser marks in the written. I have seen candidates with 50% marks being selected in IAS when they scored heavily in the. So things was there in hand, which they prepared for almost 2.5 years. If you are not doing well here, 163 is a very good score for any candidate. Of course, there is a chance to get another 20. 180 can be just the upper kind, though some people do get 200. But that's a chance on that day.
Achal Avasthi is asking, while thanking you for the very valuable input, that while answering questions, should we look into the eye of the member who's asking, and also at the same time look at the other members in between?
Yeah, I think when you talk to somebody, obviously you're looking at him. You're not looking at the ground in your feet. You're not looking at the bottom of the table. It's a normal phenomenon. When two people talk to each other, they look at. Now, if you know the distance between the chairman and you is not more than 3 feet. And when you look at and the people are sitting so close, they automatically look at you. So you have to make a very special effort. As I said, remain as it is, answer normally, and that's it. It's a very simple thing.
Aditya Narayan wants to know, how does one deal with questions that are unknown to me? Would it suffice to politely say that I do not know the answer?
It's a better thing to do. Say no. It's better. But you can take this chance of saying no 2 times. If you repeat 3, 4 times, that means you're not prepared your mains properly. Because subjects around are similar. It's a law and order, it is development, India's relationship, India's schemes. This is what the mains is about.
Fayaz Asif is asking, is there any significant advantage or disadvantage for people who have interview close in January as compared to later dates? Closer in Jan, I mean early dates as compared to later dates.
Not at all. Each candidate is judged on the merit, and it has no relationship with, there's no relative marking. If there are in the forenoon 5 candidates come, they are individually judged. And they are not waited till the 5 are interviewed in. So it is individual judgment. It doesn't matter. You appear in the first day and the last day. Some people believe that by the time the final you pass through 1 month, questions which are circulating will help you. Questions remain similar every year. Please understand. Except some events which have occurred now. Otherwise, discussion similar. It doesn't change very much.
Shashank says, can I take a gap of 5 to 10 seconds to think over the answer in mind once the question is put to me?
Yeah,
before
obviously,
articulating.
when you listen question carefully, there's no time limit in which you can answer. I already said you got 30 minutes, 5 minutes each to expert, 6 question you can divide your time difference. More question to you, better performance you will do. If you remain in 2 areas and you are not doing well, you are gone. So try to in a situation where you give enough time to them to ask question. I think this is also not a mistake. Sometimes board members do ask question which in 3 lines whose answer could be yes and no. So point is that You listen carefully, and from your side, say the best thing in over.
Surya, who's a law graduate, says, how deep should I prepare for the graduation subject since my optional is a different subject? Will I be asked questions on specific details on my subject, which is law, or should I be more well versed with opinion based questions?
So please understand if you read through what the gazette notification say, it clearly says the subject which you took as a graduate, undergraduate student, you should know it. How depth it depends on you. There you are saying that you are a learner or through. And you don't forget once you learn. If you show that kind of dimension that you have forgotten, I think you are opening a corner which says that every time you forget your past. Please don't do that. And you have done it for 3 years. In law degrees, 5 years nowadays. So it depends. Fundamental must be clear. Some important case laws must be known. If they ask you a Nirvaya case, what's wrong? Because Nirvaya case is still implementable. Still there are problems. And that is where the discretion the candidate has to do. Now, they depends on the people asking them question. They don't question themselves. If you were the board 5 member in you, what question will you ask to you? If you are able to predict that, you have done your work.
Akshit is wondering if an unimpressive, detailed application form can negatively impact your interview.
Not at all. No.
Okay. How crucial is DAF in marks range? If some questions in the DAF are left unanswered, does that have any impact? Ravi Chandran wants to know.
Why only deaf? Any questions which you leave unanswered? Obviously, they 30 question you answered 10, less marks you'll get.
Though you have said it
Deaf, obviously, you are filled up, and it is proposed that you have done everything. Only those candidates in deaf are not answer, they try to cook up.
So you've already mentioned it in your talk and a couple of times, but still D. Madhan wants you to once more reiterate. Dr. Madhan, what personality traits exactly, maybe you could just point out 3 or 5 to impress the board to award 190 plus marks to candidates?
Your communication, which allows you what you are saying to be understood by them clearly without any muck and filth. That's number one. Number two, you're not to impress board by anything, caste, creed, religion, knowledge, and other things. When you ask question on role model, don't take those which are in the present setup in the government. Number three, don't be dishonest to board any point of time. Remain very calm, quiet, in a balance of judgment.
Right. So, Professor Agrawal, I think I will have to now call the other two speakers. And you please, I'm sure you'll stay on and maybe also listen to them. And we'll take in more questions a little while later.
So I would have been very keen to listen to my two very young colleagues.
Okay.
I'm sure I wish them best. Unfortunately, I had a commitment to make.
Oh,
But
lovely.
Siddharth, I'm
Okay.
sorry, and so is KP. I would have really loved to listen, and maybe someday I find
Okay.
time. If there are
Okay.
question ever, let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I take leave.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being with us.
Thank you.
So now it is time to introduce our next two speakers. First, I'll introduce Mr. Kiran BP, who's currently the ASP of Matancheri. He graduated in BTech Electronics and Communications from the Government Engineering College, Thiruvananthapuram, and joined Oracle, the global software giant, where he worked for close to a decade. While he was on this full-time job, he balanced his work life and UPSC preparation, and in his first two attempts in 2017 and 2018, he cleared the prelims. In his third attempt, he cleared the mains, but in his fourth attempt, he failed the prelims, only to bounce back in his fifth attempt, clearing all the 3 stages of the exam. And not only that, he also topped the interview round. So let us all hear from Mr. Kiran now. How did he achieve? Over to you, Kiran.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for the kind introduction. So good morning, friends. So I'll be just talking about a couple of things that I did during the personality test preparation. So I have this presentation loaded. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So this was my civil service journey. There's a small correction to what ma'am had said. So the first two
Oh, I'm
attempts
sorry.
I failed at the prelims. Second, third attempt I failed at the mains. Fourth, again I failed at the prelims. And fifth, I made it through. Okay, let's just move on to the next slide, please. So we'll start with the basics. So from the basics, you all know the common things. So I'll just impress upon you some stuff which I feel is really important and should be covered once more. So prepare your DAF really, really well. You should be able to speak for 2 minutes on any key word. And I repeat, any key word in your DAF. So you should, if you are from a particular locality and they tell you to speak for 2 minutes about that particular locality, you should be ready. If you are from a particular stream of engineering, or let's say some other graduation subject, and they tell you to speak about that for 2 minutes, you should be able to do that. So you should first list down all the keywords in your DAF and then prepare a very good 2 minute content for it, so that even if you're given the opportunity to speak on it for 2 minutes, you should be able to do it in a good way, because these are things that you've already mentioned in your DAF. Secondly, I would like to say that I personally attended a lot of mock interviews, but make sure that you are attending these interviews where the panel members are really good. So I made sure that I had the opportunity to attend mock interviews where the panelists were really good. And in that, I would like to say that, do not take all the feedback that they give you very seriously, because I have had some negative experience. Just to list out one for you. So one of the panel members who's never attended a UPSC interview. So during the feedback, that panelist told me that you are not excited when you get a question that you know of, nor are you disappointed when you get a question that you don't know. So we don't see any emotions in you. You are like blank all the time, and we are not able to gauge who you are. You need to be more expressive. So this was the comment that gave. Oh, so I just noted that down. Okay, and thank the panelists for their comment and just thought on this. So having worked for 10 years in the corporate sector, I've seen a lot of meetings where things have gone wrong, things have gone well, and everything. And I personally feel if you remain confident and your tone does not change, it is good. So I did not take this comment or too seriously at that point. But what I did was I went back to one of my mentors at Fortune IAS, and I discussed it with him. And he told me that this is a good trait that you have. I mean, people, you should always be calm. I mean, you might be, as a civil servant, you might be having crisis or catastrophes, and still you should be in your zone to think through and be calm and guide people through. And this is something good. So you needn't take this comment too seriously and implement it. And I didn't implement it also. So I think give some thought to all the comments that are coming in, especially from people who might not have attended the UPSC interview or people who are not civil servants. So just give some thought to their comments, because there might be some negativity coming in from that side of the spectrum. Secondly, I would like to say that try to simulate your UPSC environment for mock interviews, because the interview or the personality test is fundamentally presenting your best self on that day. So you need to be in your zone. You need to be comfortable. You need to think through things. So try to simulate as much as you can in the UPSC, in these mock interviews of the UPSC environment. So if you are planning to go for the interview wearing a blazer, do that in one of your mock interviews, just to make sure that you are comfortable while sitting down, or you are buttoning down your suit when you're sitting down, or that makes you more comfortable. So just to make sure that you are in your zone, try to simulate your UPSC interview environment there. And just to give you examples, so my interview happened during 2022. So we were having the second wave of COVID at that time. So I gave a lot of mock interviews with a face mask on. So because maybe in the interview, they might tell me to wear the face mask. And actually it did happen, because 2 days prior to my interview, one of the panel members got COVID from one of the candidates. So they actually were telling us all to wear the face mask and gave the interview. So when you give the interview with a face mask on, your voice does not come out as much as it normally does. So since I had already given one of the mock interviews with a face mask on, I was aware of this problem and I could raise my tone slightly when I was giving that mock interview. And that made me more comfortable in the actual interview as well. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So some add-on points here. So this is something I did. There will be a lot of Telegram channels where the candidates who have completed their interview will be sharing their interview questions. So I used to go through all these interview, transcripts religiously, pick out all those questions which were relevant to me, like from the topics that I've written in the exam or the stuff that I've written in my draft. I would pick out those questions which are relevant to me, and I would prepare on those questions. And the reason why I used to do that, because in my long stint in the corporate sector, I have actually interviewed more than 100 plus candidates. So in that, I used to repeat my questions and across candidates. And the reason why I used to repeat those questions is because one, I wanted to benchmark all the candidates across a certain set of questions is to know how best they're solving them. And secondly, I was very sure of their answers because these are my standard questions and I knew their answers really, really well. So when a candidate gives me an answer, I can gauge him on how far he's from the right answer or how close he is to the right answer. So based on that, I did this. So the number of questions that came in were too high. So I couldn't, with an active work life, prepare for all the questions. So what I did was I gave a bunch of questions to my dad, a bunch of questions to my mom, and a bunch of questions to my wife. So they actually prepared these answers and came back and I just studied them. And I think I got 2 or 3 questions from these questions which I had prepared on. And next is, I think one of the questions had come, if you do not know the answer. I think the question that came to Sir Agrawal sir was like, if you don't know the answer, should I say I don't know? I would say all of you should prepare 3 or 4 or even more ways to politely say I don't know. Because I don't think any interviewer would want to hear a candidate say I don't know blankly or like bluntly like that. So you should say it in a polished way. And you should also understand that this is a personality test to see how best you can navigate things even when you are asked questions you don't know. So just to give you an example, I had put in watching football as one of my hobbies, and they asked me the length of the football pitch. And at that time, I was not sure whether it was 100 or 102 or 105 or whatever. So my answer to that question was, at this point of time, I'm not able to recollect the correct dimension of the pitch. This is what I said. So it is kind of like sugarcoating your I don't know. And I think all of you guys should prepare 3 or 4 or more ways to say I don't know in a very polished way so that you don't repeat your same answer. And also you are also at the same time admitting you don't know. And one very important thing is do not bluff. So sir had also mentioned about the importance of being honest there. So one of my friends who actually had very low marks in the interview in one particular year, he was asked this question, have you faced corruption? And he said no. Come on, we all live in India. They have like decades of experience, life experience. They have seen all kinds of scenarios, people and everything. So it is a very obvious bluff. So I would always say never bluff in any of your questions. Always be honest because these are people who have like decades of experience in whatever they're doing. And next, I would like to say, connect the dots wherever possible. So if you could connect one question with the other question, that'll be awesome. So I had a panelist who was asking me about privatization in government. And the next question that came up was, are there something that people could do or like other organization could do in policing? So I could connect the privatization in government with other organization doing something in police. So basically, I told that police need not do police verification or passport verification anymore, and it could be outsourced to some other organization, and that's like bringing in private sector as well as making another organization, do stuff that police can do. And can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so these are some additional tips. So I am okay, the bull is dead. So this is a this is an article I would strongly recommend that you guys all read this, because this is an article that was shared to me by my boss in the corporate sector, saying he wants us to report in this fashion. So this is a reporting fashion in which you report saying first the punchline that you want to deliver, secondly the current status, and thirdly the next steps, and finally the explanation. Usually we all start off with the explanation and try to deliver the punchline at the end or in the middle or something, but you should always deliver your punchline to your questions at the beginning itself. And I'll tell you another example of why I say so, because in one of the mock interviews, the interviewer was very smart. So that person put across a question to me saying, do you see any merit in caste system? So my whole thought process went like, I'm supposed to find some kind of good thing in the caste system. So I thought, and I said, I found something that I read in one of the texts or somewhere, and I said yes, but I wanted to say, but the caste system was majorly, or was majorly negative. But the moment I said yes, I was cut off. The moment I said I was cut off, and they kind of dragged it into a deeper conversation, and it went into a space where I didn't want to go to, and which I was not supporting also. So what I want to say is you should deliver your punchline in the first line itself, because you might not be able to complete your sentence in the coming words. So you should always try to deliver the punchline first, so that in case if one of the panelists tries to cut you off, you already have put across your point. And be pleasant, be courteous. And you should always realize that this is a test of personality and not of knowledge, as I said. So even if you are going through some tough questions that are put across to you, make sure that you do not lose your confidence, and you can gather yourself together and stay calm and composed, because if you do that itself, it's a good thing. And I also want to add one more thing here. As an interviewer, when I was interviewing for my corporate job, or when I was interviewing candidates in my corporate job, the very first thing that I used to look for was to see if this particular candidate is a team player. Because if he's a team player, the second thing I would try to gauge is, does he have the knowledge to carry on the work I want? Because if he's not a team player, it's a pain working with someone like that. Every time you want to communicate something to him or her, that person might push back, or that you might not be able to communicate freely, or you might not be able to communicate ideas freely. So the fact that you are a team player is the first thing that I was looking for in the candidates that I was interviewing at my corporate job. And that is exactly what I also wanted to present to the panel during my UPSC interview, that I'm a team player. I'll be there as a part of a team, and will be there for the bigger goal. And as a thing to that, I want to say, always take a balanced view. When you are given a prospect or a question, you should be able to think out on both sides of the thing. So let's say if somebody is talking about digitization and things like that, you should be able to look into the positive aspects of it as well as the negative aspects of it. And then you shouldn't present the negatives and negatives. You should present them as challenges and give solutions to them. So that way you are actually being positive to change, but at the same time, you acknowledge the challenges and you have ways or solutions to move ahead. Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to be a status quo. You want positive change, you want to move ahead, you want to bring in new things. So always be positive to things. Don't be a cribber, or don't crib about things, or don't complain about things. So be very balanced and positive. And read the newspaper religiously. So Hindu was a newspaper that I used to read religiously. So even on my days prior to the just getting into the interview, I read through all the newspapers. I think I went through one or two, and I think my dad also went through a couple of newspapers and sent me a couple of important things, because you are expected to be up to date. So you might get questions from today's newspaper when you go for today's interview. And also, some other things that I want to say is, get a good mentor. Understand what the UPSC interview is like. Like what happens, what is the time, what do you do when you get into the UPSC Bhavan, what do they make you do, what are the paperwork that you should carry with you. So understand all these things and talk to this mentor who has attended the interview 2 or 3 times. Because I was fortunate enough to have multiple mentors at Fortune. who have gone for the interview multiple times, and they were able to guide me through the whole process. So one of the key things that one of my mentors told me was that when he used to go for the afternoon session of the interview, you have to report at 1 p.m. And he used to skip lunch. And then he realized that after skipping lunch and going for the interview, he was becoming more aggressive. So he told me to take lunch at like 11:30. It was tough, but he also told me to take snacks along with me so that even if my interviews at the last were like 3:30 or 4, I would still not be hungry or would not be in an uncomfortable zone. So I would say try to understand the whole process that will happen on that day from people who have prior experience. Then plan it out in your mind, and also prepare well for that day, so that you are not in a stressed out setting, or you are not in a uncomfortable setting, and you are in your zone to deliver your best on that day. With that, I would like to conclude, and I have a couple of more slides where I have the interview questions that were thrown across to me. But since I've already, come up with my time, I will not be going through it.
Maybe those could figure in your answers to some questions. We have lots of them, but will now go to our third speaker before we start taking the questions. And thank you, Kira. That was really a wonderful, wonderful insight into how the interview has to be faced. So our third panelist is Mr. P.K. Siddharth Ramkumar, who's currently IAS officer trainee. He secured rank 4 in the Civil Service Examination 2023-24. Today, he's the youngest panelist in this webinar, but he's the most experienced in facing the interview panel. His first attempt in 2020 got him into Indian Postal Service, and the next two attempts he was selected into IPS. And his 2023-24 results came in while he was undergoing training in Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National Police Academy in Hyderabad. Siddharth is a graduate of College of Architecture, Trivandrum, and he will now talk about his journey and what made him click so successfully in UPSC interviews 4 years in a row till he settled for his dream choice as an IAS officer. Welcome, Siddharth.
Thank you, ma'am. Can I get the presentation on?
Yeah, the academy staff should be helping you.
Okay, ma'am. So I'll just introduce, I'll just start with this thing. So I'm an architecture graduate. I graduated and then straight away got into UPSC preparation. So after 2019, about when I started preparation, it was about the time when COVID also started. And most of my preparation happened from home, although I did go to certain especially for interview, I did take a lot of mock interviews in my first attempt, especially. So I gave 4 interviews, 2020, 21, 22, and 23. And in my 2020 attempt, um, I think I gave about 30, 40 mocks. And I did a lot of preparation, especially because I was free. That was my first serious attempt. I was not working. I put in everything that I could possibly do for the mains, for the interview. And in that way, that year, in fact, I got a decent mark also. I got about 187, which I think is a decent score in the personality test or interview. And my marks mostly stayed the same also. My marks was about 185, 187 in 3 out of 4 attempts. Okay, so we'll just start with the presentation. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so we'll just look into what the personality test or interview is. I'll use it interchangeably for the sake of convenience. And then my experiences, key areas which need to be focused on, and how to go about in the next 2 to 3 months, how to engage, and finally, some final tips. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, starting with the personality interview phase. I think interview phase is the most interesting phase where you can prepare with a lot of heart and passion into it, and where everything you do can be connected or can be used in the interview questions in one way or the other. So again, using the emotional intelligence, the Aristotle's model of persuasion, like what are the key factors? Like, is it just about the emotion or the feelings? No, it is about ethos. It is about, that is credibility. It is about logos, that is logic and reason. It is about pathos, which is emotions and feelings. And it is also about kairos, that is the right and opportune moment to say something. So the art of speaking, or the art, so effectively the interview is about you being asked a certain set of questions to be judged upon in a limited amount of time, that is about 30 minutes, let's say, roughly. And how you respond to each of the questions, and the overall impression that you create in a short span of 30 minutes. So your answers should have a mix of let's say numbers. Credibility can be given, can be showed through numbers, through examples, through cases, through structuring, and logic and reason as to the question of why something has happened, or why something is significant, what, why, how, and the five w's. And emotion, I think, is one extra element that gets added in the interview stage, especially because you are talking to a set of panelists who are essentially humans. So in the movie, The Dead Poet Society, the protagonist says that end of the day, we are all humans. We read poetry not because of any other reason. We read poetry because we are humans. We respond to emotions. We respond to feelings. We respond to ethics, and these are effectively the things that drive us. We might add facts, we might add cases, we might add logic, and all of that. But still, why are we doing all this? End of the day, we are doing this for a certain stimulation to our emotions and feelings and ethics. So I think pathos is an element which you should play to well. Okay, the next slide, please. So briefly, my experience for interviews: 2020, I got 187. 21, my marks dipped to 160, which I think is a below average mark. And with the same board, I had the same chairperson, although the other members were different. But the same chairperson who even remembered that I came from an architecture background with anthropology optional, and he was very warm in greeting me initially. But still, the marks dipped by about 27 marks, which is huge. And 2022 attempt, again, my marks improved back to 187, and 23 attempt again 185. So three out of my four interviews I feel went well. And so some of the interesting questions, bouncers or full tosses, as you may call it. So in my first attempt, it was my first attempt after graduation, like first serious attempt after graduation. So I was seen as a fresher. And it was also the COVID year. And from my DAF, some of the areas that were focused upon were cricket, because I played cricket all my life. And again, coming from Kerala, Kerala is an interesting state for people to ask questions on, questions like migration, questions like general questions about Kerala, secularism, migration, and then my meaning of the name, Siddharth. Questions about Buddhism, and one, if I can connect to the pathos element, one question that was asked to me was, what is the meaning of your name? So I told it is connected to, related to Buddhism, and they then connected it with Buddhism. Then they asked me what. So I took the interview, or I tried to guide it towards the different elements of Buddhism, like the different truths in Buddhism, like that life is full of suffering. That is the first truth in Buddhism. So elements of philosophy which somehow they connected. So I feel and I think there is always a start which is remembered, an end that is remembered, and also some two or three very good highs or lows which will be remembered. And depending on all three of these, your whole interview experience will be judged upon, because end of the day, that's how people remember. So I think two or three questions on Buddhism, philosophy, cricket, where I added some interesting examples, I feel, in hindsight. So these were things which probably helped me. In 2021 attempt, my marks dipped. Again, there is an element of randomness. So architecture I had prepared extensively, but somehow, probably because of Ukraine crisis or something, they asked me a question on East European architecture. So that put me on the back foot. Somehow I was not able to give. I did not prepare well on East European architecture as such, because that is not something you prepare in architecture as well. You prepare on Gothic, you prepare on other styles of architecture, but East European is not something you prepare well. Again, in Central Vista, so I gave an opinion on the Central Vista project, which slightly differed, I feel, with what they wanted. but somehow 2 or 3 questions which I think went really not so great, then again changed the whole result of my interview. 22, again, I was in IPS by then. So questions revolved around IPS because again, policing is a subject that people are fascinated about. They have a lot of doubts. They have a lot of stereotypes about policing. So questions revolved around policing. I had prepared extensively on policing. Again, it was more led by logic, more led by facts. Questions were around those. So again, it went decently. And my last interview, 2023 attempt. So again, the interview again went well. I had a diplomat who was the chair of my board, and questions again revolved around my hobbies like heritage walk. So they combined a few of the topics in my detailed application form. So they combined. They asked me, the first question they asked me was, if you had to take a heritage walk around the theme of cricket in India, which all places in India would you go? So this is something that you should prepare on logically, because both cricket and heritage walk appeared in my form. And if I prepared on cricket and heritage walk separately, logically they can connect the same, or they can connect two or three. So that was like a full toss. That was a question that I had prepared, and I think I was able to answer well. And again, some questions like why police is feared in India, because by then I was doing my training in NPA Hyderabad. And again, why police is feared, or why police is has some negative connotation, like in how policing is done in India and all that. So again, you could combine some positive examples. You could combine examples of great IPS officers and great IPS or great policing squads from India, and then come up with an effective answer that again combines the logic, the reason, the emotion, all of that. And then the last question that they asked me, incidentally, possibly because the next day was the International Women's Day, they asked me 10 women who inspired me. Again, I had not prepared on that as such, and I didn't remember the next day was Women's Day. But then again, somehow, um, on the spot, because I had prepared on examples from administrative service, police service, foreign service. So I took out examples from AS, PS, FS, and then I knew a lot of. I followed women's cricket also, so I took out examples from the Indian women's cricket team, from the Olympic finalists and Olympic winners from India, and then I ended with my mother. So although and the chairperson actually told me the answer, the fact that you quoted your mother is a very common and predictable thing, but then still he liked it. He smiled. He was very warm, and then I replied, "Sir, it's an Indian mind. That is how our minds work." So I think it's important to, even if some of the answers, some of the things that you say are very predictable, I think somewhere you should connect with the board. Somewhere you should be able to think on your feet, and some of the general things like you should be articulate, you should be confident, you should be able to structure your answer well, and all of that. Okay, continuing. Next slide, please. Okay, some extra things that I did, possibly again, some of them are very common. So one is like I used to, you could message to your own, like you can message yourself in WhatsApp. So every time I found something interesting from a movie that I watched, or from a book that I read, or something from some conversation that I had, I used to put it in my, send it to myself. And also I had some interview groups also. I think unlike prelims and mains, interviews one stage where you can form groups of three or four or five or six, like smaller groups, wherein you can have mock interviews or discussions at a regular level. I've had, I think, two or three very good groups for discussion, and I think about 80% people of from that group have entered services. So those groups actually help you discuss within your groups, within your friends who've cleared. So I had a group within NPA. I had a group while I was in Post and Telecom. I had a group even in my first attempt. And in that attempt, whoever was there in the group, incidentally, everyone is cleared. So it helps you in the long run for sure. And then I used to have mocks at home. My brother is a lawyer, practicing lawyer at Kerala High Court. My father was also retired by then. And both of them used to take mocks for me. Then I used to, like, again, UPSC is a journey that makes you really tired, questions you every day, and you have a lot of very, like, you have really great lows. during the journey. So I used to go on very long walks. So there's a place called Wellington Island in Cochin, where there's hardly anybody. Very big roads, long roads, wide roads, good thing. So I used to go on long walks with a small pocket-sized book, where I used to divide it into the different key words, key areas in my DAF. Key areas like policing, architecture, cricket, Kerala, heritage walk, all the main key areas, and what all questions that I could brainstorm and come up with, and any interesting tidbits or interesting facets, interesting key ideas that I can come up with, and I used to note it down in my in my small pocket-sized book. And I used to have a separate book for the preparation. So these are some things that you can possibly try. And again, interview is again a stage where you can actually have a normal life and at the same time prepare for the UPSC. So I used to go play cricket on almost every weekend, or badminton. I used to go for movies again, one or two in a week. This is in 2020 when I was fully free, and then 22, 23, I was in training. So again, not much, but I think these are things you can do. Like, have a normal life, have your own hobbies, enjoy your hobbies, whatever you've written, do that. And then be confident, think about things in the current affairs, think about things that you've written in the DAF and all of that. Next slide, please. So what are the key areas to focus upon? Three main key areas, questions will invariably come out of only these three areas. One is detailed application form. All the key words that you've given, key areas that you yourself have noted in the DAF. It could be your optional subject, your graduation subject. If your name is there a meaning to your name? The place that you come, the places in your DAF, your hometown, the places that you've worked, the places where you've lived a considerable amount of time, and all of that. And then things like your hobbies, the leadership positions that you've led, that you've noted in the DAF, and your interests and everything. There'll be roughly about 10-15 key areas that you would have noted in your DAF. So you should prepare very well on all of these areas. So DAF is one. Second is the current affairs. Again, for how long? There's no clear answer, but if you have 3 months from now, start from now, read everything. Read one or two newspapers if possible. I used to read Hindu and Express, and I used to read sometimes the business line also for a finance perspective. And so current affairs also one or two newspapers, again finance and the usual one if possible. And then the static part of the syllabus, third part, because again, this is easier because you've done your mains. And if you've done it well, you would be knowing something about all the things that are mentioned in the different GS papers. And the final thing is situational. I think situational questions are not that difficult. You should just know how you would go through. Let's say if you are an IPS officer or an IAS officer, you have a crisis. What will you do? These are the normal situational questions that can come up. So you can just have a general framework of critical thinking. You can just use the design thinking model or some normal model. Like you'll look into what is the data, what you'll evaluate what is the situation at hand at present. You'll look into what all the stakeholders, you'll consult the stakeholders, you'll look into what all situation data that you have. You look at different options that you have at your disposal, and then you'll evaluate your pros and cons, and then come up with this thing. You can again shorten it because each question will effectively give you 2 to 3 minutes. So you can shorten it, but then broadly think about what all you'll like in situational questions. Generally, the thumb rule is like don't jump into an answer, just try to arrive at the answer in situational questions, because you have to acknowledge the different diverging viewpoints. You have to take data, you have to evaluate the situation on the ground, and then come up with different options, and then finally take a reasonable course of action. And then, other than newspapers, the other sources that I referred are YouTube channels. Because again, all of us are on YouTube. We follow a lot of channels on YouTube. So, if you are into, if your first option is foreign service, you can possibly look into different channels that give a better coverage of international affairs. Can be BBC, can be DD, can be Beyond, can be anything, Vantage, or can be any show, any channel, any this thing. Even podcasts can help. So I personally feel, because end of the day, the interview or the personality test is about formal interaction with an esteemed board. you should be trying to have mock interviews, and at the same time try to listen to formal discussions, because even that helps considerably. And then whatever you like, usually, be it movies, be it poetry, be it literature, cricket, or sport, or music, try to stay connected with all of that also, because somewhere in your answer, if you can add an analogy from the sport that you like, or from the book that you have recently read, that also helps. That helps to connect with the person. That helps to contextualize the answer. That helps to personalize the answer. So that sets your answer, your interview, apart from the usual interview answers that come apart. Uh, Next slide, please. So this is my detailed application form, the page where you quote the hobbies, interests, and leadership positions held. So again here, what I felt is like in the first attempt, in my 2020 attempt, because I wanted to go all in. My usual approach is to give an impression that I'm confident, to give an impression that I have a lot of interest, a lot of positions held. So I filled with 3, 4 very long options in the prices, in the sports, in the positions, in the hobbies. But then I somewhere felt they were not very readable. So if end of the day, if they don't pick one or two from this, you don't get questions on this, and the whole purpose gets defeated. So this time I made it very simple. My hobbies, I just gave heritage walks. Again, it was connected to my architecture. I used to do it, and it was connected to my background. So I anyway had to prepare an architecture, and something that came out of that connecting with Indian heritage, I thought it helps. And yoga, because again, because of the whole UPSC tension and all of that, I started yoga and a little bit of meditation. And then mostly it is cricket from awards and leadership positions. So this is like very simple, one or two you can give in each. And there are people who don't give anything in one or like if you don't want to quote any sport or this thing, you can leave it blank. But I would suggest like at least quote one in each of it, in each of the 4 things, and ideally one or two. Can we move to the next slide, please? So, just to show how I made notes, short notes for different areas. So, let's say if it is architecture, because I had architecture. So I wanted, so Charlie Munger talks about thinking in frameworks. So I think thinking in frameworks actually helps a lot, because in the final interview, you are stressed. You think that this is the day, this is the biggest day in your life. So you might not be able to always come up, think on the feet very well, or come up with a framework on that day, on that moment. So I had frameworks to think for each of the key area that I had in my DAF. So if it was architecture, the Vitruvian triad, that is a form, function, structure. So if a question on architecture came, I tried to structure it in terms of this framework, in terms of form, in terms of function, in terms of structure. Or if you wanted to make it a little Indic, Paristhiti, Sanskriti, Vistara, like again, similar things, culture, environment, and all that. Or the normal thumb rules in architecture, like form follows function, or less is more by Mies van der Rohe, or things like that. Or in terms of the different elements, materials, lighting, energy, etc. And then to quote some Indian architects, famous Indian architects, into the answer, so that I am contextualizing it. So I'm adding examples and then connecting with somebody. Everybody, almost everyone in India knows about Laurie Baker, BV Doshi, Didi Contractor. So somewhere you need to add examples, you need to add facts, you need to connect with some of the emotions, as I said earlier. Next slide, please. So this was about yoga.
Siddharth, can I interrupt? Could you just
Yes,
rush
ma'am.
through your slides because we are running out of time? I have to take questions also.
Okay, ma'am. I'll rush.
Yeah.
So similarly for yoga, again, I had prepared on applications, steps taken, and different things. Next slide, please. Heritage walk again. Just to go into it, heritage walk again. I looked into what is heritage walk, how it can be used in administration, the DM walk, the diplomat walk, the SP walk. In corporate, how can you use it? Bama Lorry used to use it. In tourism, how can you use it? With example, in cricket, and why is it important? Like there's this whole story of Kyoto not being a place of bombing. Because it was a place where the person who decided went earlier. So you can use stories, you can use anecdotes and all of that. And again, you can connect it wherever it can be used. Next slide, please. And then general verbal and non-verbal stuff, like wherever possible, connected with stories, anecdotes, wherever. And in terms of non-verbal cues, have a formal don't focus much on your dressing or all of that, but just be normal. If you're wearing a suit, wear a proper suit, maintain eye contact with the person talking, and you can occasionally look at the others also, and then have a confident posture. Hand movements, again, whatever is natural is what I believe is good. And wherever possible, you can lead the interview to areas which you're confident. And if not possible, just play along. Next slide, please. And then some myths, I'll just try to debunk some myths. Like, do people from IIT, IIM, AIMS, or any other from already in service, do they have an advantage? I think they don't. Younger or older, again, like younger, I think possibly helps. If you're younger, again, both people have their own advantages. If you're younger, you have an advantage that the system tries to give you more advantage because you don't have much experience. Older, you have the advantage of having experience. So you have advantages on both sides. Morning, evening, absolutely. I don't think there's any difference. Color of suit, no. English fluency, again, no. Second gen, third gen advantage, I certainly think no, because there are 5 people. It will balance out. So everything balances out. And then particular board better. Again, there are people who say some boards give the average mark is more. Probably. But you shouldn't play for the average. So you should think about like every board gives at least 180 plus is given by almost every board. So you have a chance in any board. How many mocks, again, doesn't matter. Just give the amount of mocks that makes you comfortable. Okay, next slide. Final tips and takeaways. I think you can take a little bit of time to think depending on the question. And then depending on the question, give an answer which is opinionated or which needs a case study, example, fact. And then everywhere, try to structure your answer into 3 things or 5 things. Depending on the area, also you can. If it's economy, demand side, supply side. Depending on the area, have frameworks. Think in models, think in frameworks, and answer in frameworks. And switch from the HR questions to the current affairs, to the hobbies and different areas into DAF. Try to connect the different areas which you are prepared on, even if the question is focused on one area. And then connect with core civil service values and core Indian values. Because end of the day, that is what will appeal to them. If you show that you are honest, if you are, you can display integrity through some example, that will help. Again, what, why, where, how, think in frameworks. Be confident, be articulate, and be balanced in your this thing, and enjoy the ride. I think interview is a beautiful process in this whole UPSC journey, and I think it's the only stage where the whole preparation and the actual thing you can enjoy. You can quote cinema, you can quote literature, you can quote people who inspired you, and anything under the sun, as long as you are balanced and you are reasonable. So that's it from my side, and I'll take questions if there's any.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you, Siddharth, for that very interesting talk and taking us through your journey. Since you shared your marks, and as you were discussing backroom also, when you got 116 interview, you got selected. When you got 185, 187, you obviously got selected. So you were mentioning about, the focus being on the mains and interviews only 15%. So it is
Yes,
not really, one really doesn't need to be intimidated about the interview. Could just maybe share one point on that.
yes, ma'am. So, 85% of the final marks is from mains. And if your mains has gone well, again, you can't be sure of how well you have gone, how well your mains has gone while you are preparing for interview. But I think even then, a normal candidate who has prepared well can get about 165 to 185 so easily. Like any confident, good candidate can get 165 to 185. So you shouldn't be very much intimidated about the interview, and also it also works, it is counterproductive. So if you are more tense, if you are intimidated by the interview stage, your marks will anyway go down. So it doesn't help you in any way. So from a very utilitarian perspective, you should be confident, you should be happy about the whole stage, excited about the whole stage, and you should be thinking that your mains has gone well. And you never know, you should be open to surprises, positive surprises. I think interview is not a stage you should be intimidated about. And although yes, like 5 marks here and there can make a lot of difference. So it is not something you should not take seriously. You should take it seriously, but not be intimidated about.
Yeah, I would like to bring in Kiran because Kiran, you scored 206 and you were the national topper, interview topper. So did you focus specifically on interview and attend more number of mock interviews, or how was it for you? Was it an easy sale and you felt confident after the interview that yes, you've made it?
So I did not attend each and every mock interview. So I used to filter my mock interviews just to make sure that I was getting quality content and I was attending, getting quality feedback also. So I would suggest candidates that they attend a good number of mock interviews, not just 3 or 4, but I wouldn't give a number here, but 10 would be a fair number. Also is fine. So they attend quality panels, basically. Attend good panels. Go for informal discussions with your mentors. So I have gone for multiple rounds of informal discussions with my mentors where they have thrown questions at me, given their answer also, and I've given my answer also. So you understand the difference in perspective, which helps you kind of balance out things. And other than that, after the interview, I felt I had given my best. I don't know how others did the interview. So I just felt I gave my best, and that was all I could do that day. And I was satisfied with the interview experience, but I was not sure whether I'll make it or not. But I was satisfied after giving the interview.
And there's a question for you from Nisa. Like, because you had 10 years of job experience, you were in a corporate job, and you were also balancing your work life and preparation. So Nisa wants to know that if you have done your graduation so long ago, say 10 years ago, and you have a work experience, so does the graduation subject also matter during the interview, or it is your work experience from where
Uh,
the focus is?
yeah. So I had worked for 10 years in the software industry and I had studied electronics and communication during my graduation. So these two things were not connected. So I focus mainly on my work, but since I was actively working a 9 to 6 job, preparing for work was not that difficult, and it was a domain that I knew of and that the interviews did not. So it was kind of easy to prepare on my work because I could pretty much say anything and not make blunders, and the interviewers couldn't, cross check that or cross verify that. But it was difficult to prepare my graduation subject after 10 years. So I did give it an attempt, but given the constraint of time and other things that were not with me at that point of time, I had to make a call and I did not prepare my graduation subject much, given that I've had 10 years of experience and only studied this like for 4 years prior to this 10 years. So I personally did not study the graduation subject much, but I think, as Agrawal sir said, it is really important, and you are expected to know what you studied for 4 years, though maybe not at the depth that you are expected as a fresh graduate. But I would suggest that you brush up the basics that everyone or every graduate of that stream is supposed to know.
Right. Siddharth, I would also like to you to come back on screen and remain on screen.
Yes.
There's some common questions also. Uh, I ask both of you, is it possible to clear IAS in today's time without attending these mock interviews, or for that matter, without attending coaching classes? Any of you
Ma'am,
could go first. Yeah.
ma'am, I think it is very much possible to clear the exam any stage without any coaching. But I think it's about having an experience. So even if you don't take a particular thing, you can still get to know. Like if you haven't taken test series from any institute for mains, you can still look at topper copies. You can download topper copies from the internet freely and then see how they've written and then compare and get an idea. Similarly, for the interview, if you have not given mock interviews, you can still see mock interviews from YouTube or and then get an idea about how things could be asked possibly, and also talk to toppers and at least have mock interviews with your family and friends or similarly placed aspirants. So I think it is possible, very much possible, and I know people who have not given test series or not many mock interviews, but there's no harm in giving one or two mocks as well because it will give you some experience in talking formally. That's my take.
So I also personally have met a lot of people at Labasana and the National Police Academy who have cleared this exam without any coaching, without any test series, without any mock interviews. So it is very much possible, but you need to do your own, analysis, figure out your own things, and it takes a little more time. So being a working professional, I did not have the luxury of time, so I needed some guidance, somebody to do that analysis for me, who will just say, Kiran, just study this, Kiran, just focus on these items. So that's why I went for coaching personally. But if you are somebody who can think analytically, who can analyze things, there are more than available resources on multiple forums, and you can go across them and clear this exam without any hindrance with all those materials and no coaching.
And what do you recommend to candidates? Like once the mains results are out, and there is normally a gap of a month before the interviews begin. So they should start preparing after the mains results are out, or they should start preparing after writing the mains exams. How
Uh,
much time actually? How much time did you guys put in? How many hours daily or over how many months, basically?
so personally speaking, I started preparing only after the mains because this was my last attempt. And since I was, working and had some personal commitments and stuff, so I started preparing only after the mains results came out. And on a time perspective, I would say maybe I would spend 3 to 4 hours a day on interview preparation. That's all, because I was working 9 to 6 at that point also.
Um, Ma'am, again, I also prepared for interview after mains result. So in my I think first two attempts, I might have given more time, and again, there's this uncertainty whether you will clear the mains or not. So even if you've cleared it once or twice, even then you have this uncertainty. There is a lot of randomness in this exam, just as in life. So I was never confident enough to take like start preparing seriously right after the mains. So I again waited till the result. But after result, I used to at least like spend 2 3 hours, because 1 hour to easily goes in even reading the newspaper, following some channel or podcast. And then but then interview stage is also a stage where you can um, work on your hobbies. If you put some sport like football or cricket, or any hobby like any art form, you can actually put in some time for that. You can enjoy that, and again, you can still think, you can still not feel guilty that you're wasting time, because you can somehow feel it'll be useful in your interview. So I think after the mains, there's about 2 3 months easily, and sometimes even more. So there's enough time to prepare for the interview after mains result.
So I think all the questions are common and apply to both of you. So you can just choose to answer. Medhas Raman is asking that during the personality test, can I give examples from my personal life? Say it could be something I saw in my village or city, or like some friend being in poverty because of improper education system. So are those kind of, I mean, citing those kind of instances without naming anybody specifically, is that appreciated uh, during the interview?
Yes, it is actually. So I've also quoted personal experiences. So it is very well accepted. And if you can relate the question.
Um, Siddharth, you have to unmute.
Ma'am, my
No, so
connection, there
yeah.
was some issue for a few seconds.
Yeah,
Can
I think we couldn't hear Kiran towards the end. There was some lag.
So I was just saying that it will be really great if you can connect the question with your personal life and quote your personal examples. So I have personally done that in my interview, and I think it's good that if you can relate the question and relate it to something in real life also.
Siddharth, would you like to add something to that?
Ma'am, again, even I used to try, at least attempt to add something, some story from like some incident or anecdote from my life of my friends. Again, like since I was in training, two trainings before, so I tried to contextualize the answer from that perspective. Like while I was in NPA, while I was in Delhi, or while I was doing some internship in college. So I tried to wherever possible, like even if a question on architecture is asked, I tried to take some instance when I was doing an internship in Pune, or whatever possible, and then also some events from my friends or some people that I know. So it's useful, but should be used in a very reasonable way. Yes.
Kiran, maybe you could take this because I remember you during the backroom discussion, you were mentioning about how you asked for a specific room when you came to Delhi for the interview, and you didn't want to have snoring room partners, roommates. So because Soumya is asking how to handle all kinds of pressure and stress during personality tests, and also if a candidate is really attending the, like, at the end of the day a session. I mean, maybe the panelists are either more aggressive or more tired. So how does that work?
Uh, See, first of all, I'm a very planned guy. So I am somebody who would not be in my zone if things are not in a very planned manner or if it's hurried. So you need to first understand what kind of a person you are. Even if things are hurried and you are in your zone, that's okay. But if you are not that kind of a person, and a hurried thing, does not give you that mind space to think and does not help you present your best self, you should prepare out your Delhi journey. So we from Kerala, when we go for the civil service interview, we are given rooms at the Kerala Bhavan, Kerala House actually. So the government books us the rooms, and it's a twin sharing room. So when I spoke to a lot of these guys or my mentors, they told me that this is the twin sharing room. Sometimes your roommate might show up at the middle of the night when you have your interview the next day. So your sleep is disturbed, or you might get a roommate who snores so much that you will not be able to sleep the whole night. Again, your sleep is disturbed, and when your sleep is disturbed, you are irritated. Maybe you are not in your zone. You might not be thinking through, correctly. So all of these things are inputs just before you go to Delhi. So I planned out my Delhi trip. When I went to Delhi to the Kerala Bhavan, I told those guys there that I have my interview tomorrow. So kindly do not allot anybody to my room during the night. And also, if possible, please do not allot me a roommate. And they were kind enough to, help me out with that. So they only allotted me a roommate on the next day after my interview. And he did show up at midnight around 1 a.m. So these kind of small things, it adds up. So things like going hungry for the interview because you're supposed to report at 1 p.m., which is like nowhere. It's not like a space where you can go in having your lunch, or there isn't an opportunity to have lunch once you report also. So you need to go for an early lunch. That was told by my mentor. So I had a lunch at 11:30, and then I went it with snacks because again, you might stay till the end of the day, and you might still be hungry. And even though UPSC provides those snacks, you might not be in your zone eating them. So I took along my snacks, had you know my own supply of all the other things that I wanted, and that just kept me in the zone. So I would suggest that you plan out your things really well, expect all the eventualities, and negate them, and you have done your best to be in your zone now. Whatever comes is like just fate.
Does it go against a candidate who asks for postponement of their personality test date? I mean, if they want to get it postponed to the last day, does that affect in any way if you get your dates changed?
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
I think for medical reasons, dates can get postponed. Although I don't have a personal, I've not done it personally. I think there's no issue if you have a legitimate medical ground because of which you are asking for the same.
Akshay is saying, given that the interviews are starting next month, what should be the ideal schedule for those going in for the interview in January, in the early dates? The ones who are going early for the interviews, what schedule would you recommend for them?
I think interview stage, there's no one size fits all, just like in mains. But interview, like you should read a newspaper or two, and then possibly try some mocks or have some discussions on a regular basis. I think discussions are better, where you pick up topics within a group or within your friend group or within the aspirant group or some group. Uh, and there are people who try out the same on with the mirror. They talk to themselves and then try to see how their verbal and non-verbal cues are working or whether it's not working. I think 1 or 2 hours for newspaper, new current affairs. 1 hour probably for DAF. I think 3 to 4 hours is good enough, and then probably you can also spend some time on the DAF, on the hobbies and interests that you have mentioned in the DAF, so that you will naturally be good at whatever you have mentioned. And even if you have mentioned some hobbies which you don't practice, or and if you have already mentioned them in the DAF, this is a good time to actually start and be good at it.
Pressure. Yeah.
Yes.
Kiran, you agree to
Yes, I
whatever he said? Yeah.
because those for those going in January, you don't have many transcripts to go through of the previous guys who went in. So you will have to just focus on the basics like reading the newspaper, preparing your draft really well, and just be thorough with your basics. That's the best that you can do when you are going in first.
Also, like a lot of candidates, of course, do take subjects, and you yourself have out of your, graduation syllabus or course. So Yash Maheshwari is saying that her graduation subject is chemistry, but her optional is philosophy. So is it okay to just prepare the basics from the NCRT books?
Uh, Ma'am, I've never focused on NCRTs much, but I think there's nothing like you can never be sure or you can never say that you should only focus on a particular set of books. But I think so it also depends on which attempt you are in. I think you should be decently well versed in your optional subject and in your graduation subject. But again, the depth need not be much. Like you should try to brainstorm and come up like be have answers for questions which will generally be asked from that subject. Let's say if it is philosophy, you can have an idea about all the basic things that are there in the syllabus of the optional, or something if something comes up recently in the news, you can just be aware. Again, for the interview answer, you hardly need two or three points, so I don't think it will be much difficult. Again, for chemistry, possibly again yes, NCRT. If NCRT, I don't know if it's there for college. I think it's for school, but
School, yeah.
whatever for basic, if you've done your graduation in chemistry, I think whatever basic thing, you can just take out your syllabus and look at what all keywords are there in the syllabus and just see if you know at least something about everything that is mentioned in the syllabus, and just brainstorm, just ask other people about what they might ask about chemistry, and then just have an answer, just see if you have answers for the basic questions that might come up.
No, no, the question was the person has taken philosophy.
Yes, ma'am. So I think both
So
philosophy and
same.
chemistry.
Hmm.
But like again, come brainstorm about the questions that might possibly come up, and then have a decent answer. Like I don't think it'll take much time.
So there are a couple of repetitive questions like people who are appearing for interview in
Can I add a
February.
small thing to that?
Sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
please.
so I totally agree with what Siddharth said. So both your optional subject and your graduation subject are you are supposed to know at a graduation level. And given that you just given the mains, your optional subject, you are at that level. But with respect to your optional subject, the NCRT is a school level textbook. So you need to evaluate whether the NCRTs cover you at a graduation level. So I'm not sure. I can't comment on chemistry. But one thing that I did was I think somewhere I met some teachers or professors of my particular stream of engineering. So to them, I went and asked, what are the main topics that a graduate of this particular stream should know? And they randomly told me some 20, 30 topics that came to their mind. Okay, and I just learned one sentence about each of them because given my paucity of time, that's what I did. So I would give you a suggestion that maybe you should go to somebody who is a well-versed professor or an authority or some faculty of yours from graduation in chemistry and just ask them what are the basics that every graduate of chemistry should know. And I think if you are a fresh graduate, you should definitely know that.
So there are a lot of repetitive questions. People who are appearing for the interview in February, March, they all specifically want to know that how should they go about their interview preparation since 1 month or 2 months are left. But I think broadly it's the same things that you have highlighted, whether it's 1 month or whether it's 3 months. I mean, the approach has to be the same. So I won't read out those questions. Meanwhile, there's one interesting question which says, did you smile during your interview? Or how much should you smile during your personality test?
Ma'am, I think you can smile as much as possible. Just don't smile at the wrong questions. If the question is asking about poverty in India or something like that, you shouldn't. Just be natural. If you can smile, if it's a personal question, if it's a question where you are interested, like you are genuinely interested on with a question, so then you should smile as much as possible and wherever possible.
Mm. Kiran, maybe you could, do you want to add something? How much
Yeah.
did you smile?
So I have a slightly different take on it. I mean, if you are not someone who, smiles all through it, it is difficult for you to go one particular day and start smiling around. So I would say always be pleasant and approachable. It doesn't matter whether you smile or not, but don't come across as a negative person or an aggressive person. So be pleasant, be courteous. You needn't smile for that, is what I feel, because I've never put in effort as such to smile during my interview. But make sure that you address the panel, you make eye contact with all the members. When you address a question from one particular members, or also you can answer the others because they are also listening. So you can acknowledge them. You can be courteous and pleasant. That's what I feel I did, and it worked.
Thank you. So Utkarsh Tripathi is saying, should we quote some committee reports in questions? Like, what is your opinion on XYZ issue, like railway boards restructuring? Basically, whether how often or how much should they quote committee reports or any findings and surveys in their answers?
Uh,
Does that show that, yeah, they have really studied well, there's in-depth knowledge, or how does that work?
Again, I think there's no clear answer to it, but I always refrained from quoting many committees or experts because I think there's very limited amount of time, and probably they are trying to find what your take is on that particular issue that they've asked. So I think if at all you're quoting, I think you should also have your own idea again. So quoting is more useful in mains, I believe, wherein for every point of for every major thing we quote a report or an expert. But in interview, I think there's nothing wrong. I can never say that there's anything wrong because it adds credibility. But I personally feel it should be analytical, and you should possibly try to quote lesser amount of experts reports, and it might they might be asking about your opinion or any new solution takeaway or something like that. So I think quoting lesser amount of experts and reports might be useful, but again, I think Kiran might have a better perspective possibly.
No, I agree with Siddharth completely, because that's the right thing. Because I feel you can quote them, but you need to reflect on them. Just because an expert has said something, you shouldn't completely buy it. And also, this expert might be not in sync with one of the panelist members. So I think you can quote them and reflect on them, and then use your own due diligence and analytical abilities to say whether it's what are the pros and what are the challenges. So I feel you can quote them, and always try to quote people who are in sync with the government. So do not quote anything that's against the government, or figures and facts and stuff that is not against the government policy. So always be in sync with the government, and try to reflect on these opinions that they give.
I think that's a very important point, to be in sync with the government. What about the dress code? Kiran, you
Uh,
would want to go first?
Yeah.
Dress code.
So dress code, the thing is, see, it really doesn't matter, to be honest, is what I feel. But the problem is when you show up for the interview and all the other guys in the room are wearing a blazer and you are not wearing a blazer, your confidence goes down. Or you might feel, I am not prepared and these guys are more prepared, and maybe the panel will give some preference to them. So I think going with the flow helps, kind of give confidence to you in these small things. So I would say, if everybody's, since most of the people wear a blazer or a sari during the interview, it would be best to do that. And also, when you are not doing things which are not in sync with the flow, you should also expect some questions that might come to you because of that. So I didn't want to disturb that and bring in unnecessary questions. So I went with the flow and had a blazer. But I personally think, if you're somebody of who can pull off these questions which come to you, or go prepared for these questions, maybe you can put it to your advantage. But this is what I feel about it.
Would you like to add something, Siddharth, or we'll wrap up now? Because if you could just sum up, just three points from each of you, what it takes to clear the UPSC personality test, the civil service exam personality test.
yeah, I think personality test. Like I think you should be just confident. You should be well prepared on all the areas that you've mentioned in your DAF from your graduation, from the current affairs, because these are things that you're expected to be good at. And then be confident, be a little articulate. So that comes with practice. There's nothing to worry about it. You talk with anybody for about a month, you'll be good at it. So I think if I can put it from a cricket analogy, I think be confident like Sehwag or Viv Richards, and play it long like Dhoni. Like it's a 2 month, 3 month ring. And again, there's nothing like no single question or single day can ruin your this thing. I think it's about 2 3 months of preparation, and then the whole interview matters. So even if you are on the back foot in one or two questions, you can still end up getting really good marks. Probably you might display some good qualities where you say that you don't know the answer. So I think just have a larger perspective, be confident, be talk well, talk confidently, and just enjoy the process is what I feel.
Kiran?
Yeah, so the three things that said, that's like the main things. Just to add on to that, always be positive, because as a civil servant, you should always be positive and you should be taking on things. So it's not like you should be somebody who's pushing back things or have a negative attitude towards change or things like that. So you should always be positive. You should be balanced. You should be able to look at both sides of a problem. You shouldn't be blinded by any one particular side. So you should be balanced. When I say balance, when you are given a problem or a challenge, you should analyze the positives and the negatives, present the negatives as challenges, and also come up with solutions for these challenges. And when you come up with these solutions, I would suggest one more thing: come up with short-term solutions which can be implemented immediately, and come up with long-term solutions which are for the long run, which will be more effective. And I would always say that a personality test is all about your attitude, and secondly about your knowledge. So present the right attitude, go with the right attitude. So that's why I said positive. And lastly, I would like to, give you some small pro tips with respect to, dodging maybe tricky questions or maybe rephrasing questions that you don't know. So one thing that you could do when you get questions that you don't know is ask the interviewer to repeat the question, so you get some seconds to just think over the answer. And secondly, when you get a question that you don't understand, put across the question in your own words, in simple words, and just ask the interviewer if this is their question. And maybe they might say this is the question, or maybe they might rephrase your own words into and give you back the question in a simpler term. So these are two simple things that I used to do. So all these simple things and things add up to make the bigger picture. So if you've done your basics well, then these small things will also fall into place and give you a good personality test where you can present your best self. So with that, I would like to conclude and wish all the candidates the very best of luck and to enjoy the process. That said.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a very, very helpful session. Because of time constraint, we really have to call it off now. I must thank all the three speakers for all their inputs, and which also was very interesting, invigorating, and informative, and the audience for sending those very pertinent questions. Many I could be also unanswered, and maybe you could take them individually and address them later. And as you both said, the key takeaways, of course, were to be yourself, just be yourself. And if you have come this far to be able to clear the main exam, your knowledge base is sound, then just keep your cool and be confident and be honest and not over smart. Know yourself better, you said. Know your hobbies, about your city and state of birth, your childhood, growing up years, where you work. All those information are equally vital. And don't forget the support of your family and peers. The civil service exam definitely is not insurmountable, but it surely does require a lot of hard work, meticulous presentation, and a clear strategy. So I also wish all the civil service aspirants who have cleared this year's main exam the very best. Thank you all for attending the webinar. Thank you, speakers, for sparing so much time on a Sunday morning. The webinar on UPSC interview tips from experts was presented by the Hindu Education Plus in collaboration with Fortune IAS Academy as part of Career Counseling series. Thank you all once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.